Okay, we are live.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we're live. Thank you everyone for joining the first ever Celestial Global Online Hackathon. This is the Infinite Space Bazaar. This hackathon is, bringing together the entire Web3 community to push the boundaries of what is possible in the modular ecosystem. Today, we have the head of strategy, Jacob from Celestia, with us today. If you'd like to, introduce yourself, kind of talk about what you guys are building out there, the workshop and the theme that's going on for today. We'd love to just have a conversation and learn more about the hackathon and the workshop for today. Yeah, the stage is yours. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So basically, I'm head of strategy. Basically, work on kind of building out the early ecosystem. And what I wanted to present on here is sort of like how to think about this sort of concept of go to market, and what the considerations are, what the limits are of different approach of basically different components, et cetera. And so basically go from here. So let me just put the slide. So yesterday, actually, last night, there was a really good tweet that I thought basically was just really well timed for this presentation. So I threw it in there from Sobi. And that's basically like he was sort of asking on the timeline, like, hey, what's like more impactful to business success? Is it, 10x partnerships and BD and whatnot? Is it 10x dev, et cetera? And so, it's easy to sort of think about it. There's different people who probably weighed in different way. I think like the BD and partnerships one was winning when I looked at it. But the point is like, there's sort of these two different ways of thinking about go to market, and one of or like what drives like a product success. And so some people are sort of sitting on what thinking about the bus. It's like, oh, like all that really, in an org that's like thinks of itself as maybe product and eng driven as opposed to BD and sales driven. They're sort of thinking about like, well, like basically we're all that, this part of the what we're working on is all that matters and is all that's driving the success. This other part doesn't matter. And then there's some opposite case, I guess, of companies where it's like they're thinking of like, oh, all that matters is basically going and closing these 10 big customers, and basically the engineering is great, but like at the end of the day we're just basically getting adoption through sort of like just these end user relationships and whatever. And the reality is that neither of those really make sense, and are like the right way to think about it. And the right way to think about it is actually thinking about these two things in tandem, especially in the modular context, which is what I'm presenting about here. Is sort of like everything that you do has to kind of be kind of combine the two in a way, because and I'll get into why. But basically we should think about these things as fundamentally integrated into one thing called like go to market, I think. And so the way to think about it is like, product, the limit of product, sort of like a product driven or only product driven approach is like, the benefits of it are that it's extremely, extremely scalable. So like, in the case of WhatsApp, you can have a really small team, and you can have some insanely huge adoption outcomes, especially when it's network effects driven. You can get so WhatsApp, I think, have 50 engineers. This is like a while ago, it's like almost 10 years ago, but they had 50 engineers, they had 900 million users. And that's big in Web 2, but it's even more, potentially even bigger in crypto and Web 3. So you think about Bitcoin, like how many people have ever contributed to Bitcoin, and it's $1 trillion asset, right? It's $1 trillion digital gold. It's just like the sheer number, the amount of adoption relative to the number of people who ever worked on it is so enormous, that it's just sort of like just so asymmetric. And that's what happens when a product gets like really widely adopted, when it has runaway success, et cetera. And it's especially true. This property is especially true in something like the modular stack and the modular ecosystem, because the rest of everything else is built for you. So if the modular ecosystem and all these other things get a huge amount of adoption or take off, then and Celestia plugs into them, basically, or some other layer plugs into the modular stack. So their new product comes out. It can theoretically just touch everything. So you're like, oh, every layer that arrives in the modular ecosystem can theoretically, be, sort of scale in, to everything in crypto if everything becomes modular. And so like, but the reality is that's totally theoretical, right? Like you don't necessarily know whether all these other people in the stack, whether the end user cares, et cetera. And we'll get into like sort of some of that. But that's like a way to think about these, like its product is like scalable, like it can have wild asymmetric outcomes, but it's still theoretical. It doesn't guarantee anything, right? And the other thing about product is that it has all these, especially as I was going to say before, is like the modular stack has all these hidden, transaction costs, and not like the network transaction costs, but the cost of doing business or like integrating or whatever with all these other layers in the stack. And then on the other side, you have BD and sales, and that's like really local. And so it can't really like, it doesn't scale as massively by itself, but it's completely outcomes driven. So it's completely like, basically it's based entire, if it's successful, it's based on this notion of user empathy. Basically that, when you directly interface users, what is it that they want to get them to do, to achieve this outcome that you want. And but it's limited by things like manpower. It needs to align with the product direction to scale, et cetera. And then on the end to end, and it's also end to end. So like basically, the user, if it's defined correctly, the user, when they adopt something via BD, and it's driven by a BD sales is like the proximate cause. That's because basically you're basically achieving some end-to-end results. So like it's actually like the user can actually go and do what they want, or the customer or whatever, the partner can go and do what they want end to end, and that's why they're using. So like what it's really a key part of that is like validating the actual user stories, the actual ways that people use the product. And what go-to-market is about is basically it's about basically this notion of scalable outcomes. So like basically we want to basically take the scale that you get from sort of like this like crazy of products, so like the WhatsApp example, right? But we want to unlock it with the like the user empathy, that initial, if you're building something, for example, that's low in the stack, like how do users like realize the benefits? And because the sooner they realize the benefits of your product, the sooner that they're going to want to integrate you, to use stuff that's built on you, if it's infrastructure or layer. And developers who are built, or they're not thinking about, they don't really care about the infrastructure they're building on. They don't necessarily care about et cetera. They care about like achieving some some goal. Like, everything that they integrate in the modular stack is instrumental to that goal. It's not the end in itself, right? And so the question is like, how do you help them do that better, and where do you start? And then the next part is sort of like this idea of, if you're building user-facing applications, so even higher in the stack, and you're building on your own chain or whatever, you're building some new thing. What kind of new on-chain experiences can you build with this modular infrastructure that isn't possible on some chain like Base, or some place like on Ethereum mainnet, or on Solana, or what is new? Like what can you do that's actually interesting or novel, that actually justifies all the fragmentation, all the awkward bridging for now, like et cetera. And are you using it imaginatively, or are you just copy pasting something onto a cheaper chain? And can users tell? Like that's another question, right? If they can't tell, then it's also this question of like, where does it need to be? And I think actually there's a really good, one really good way of thinking about crypto is that it's actually a feature sometimes when basically something you actually know that it's on chain, because that's like the whole point is that we're scaling this like trust minimization, and these properties of blockchains are kind of embedded in every app and every product that gets built. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to find a rock or a place that unleashes an avalanche or a landslide. And so what you're looking for is like, you want to take the like local you want to use the local benefits of something like BD sales or something very targeted. And we want to create these massively scalable outcomes. And so what are the barriers to that? What's different? Well, in crypto, go-to-market works really differently than it does in traditional, in traditional like tech or traditional go-to-market broadly, in that because of what it is, the limits of control over the stack, et cetera, and the decentralization are a feature. So like in Web 2, the whole point, unlike in Web 2, the whole point of this whole infrastructure stack and all these protocols is that they're neutral. No one's supposed to control them. They're supposed to be, decentralized, et cetera. And achieving like end-to-end readiness, when all the other people that, all the other components that are necessary to build a world-class end-to-end product, et cetera, it requires, coordinating multiple parties or layers of the stack. Even in monolithic architectures, like for example, like Solana right now is having these issues with transaction, and they're relying on Jito to build, or Ethereum has relied on flashbots, right? In the case of like these MEV instances in the monolithic chain cases. And then you have stuff like, Arbitrum One, right? They want to be a native L2 of Ethereum. They need Ethereum to ship 444, right? And so there's always going to be these reliances on third parties that you don't necessarily control, and like basically or infrastructure providers where there's some specialized knowledge. And so it's not even just a modular thing. It's actually something that is just true of crypto broadly and Web3 broadly. And so coordinating across this whole modular stack is really, really tiring. It's really exhausting. And each layer can kind of have diverging incentives, et cetera. And so it's like a big limit of kind of like the way it works. But when it works, it really works. Like you can build things that are like just completely like, customized to the use case or to the developer. You can monetize it directly, et cetera. And at the benefit, right, of customization and control, et cetera. Whereas like monolithic chains are kind of like, we can control that whole end-to-end thing, but then we have like issues like all this MEV and broken transaction flows and stuff and inclusion and stuff like that, right? And so the next thing is like that the other thing about crypto that's different from a go-to-market service is that your growth and like market size are really, really not fully in your control. And so the industry, its products, things built on top, they go in and out of favor. So like things are popular for a period, maybe they're not. They may actually be the thing that's a winning architecture, a winning thing, like something like Celestia, right? Like was originally, originally it was called Lazy Ledger. It was basically in 2019, it was basically a white paper. No one necessarily, there were people kind of in the research community that understood it, saw what it could potentially be, but no one really like got it. And then eventually, the modular narrative really like took off. And then suddenly there's like people trying to do all these in every layer of the stack. There's like different people trying to do different things or trying to do the same thing in different ways. And so in crypto broadly, there's way more narrative excitement earlier on before there is like basically necessarily the opportunity that you're looking for. And so there can also be this limitation to a lot of go-to-market. The other one that's really one of the superpowers is that in crypto that in Web3 is that open source software is just the runaway default. Building in the open, switching costs are really low. But anyone can fork you, anyone can copy you, anyone can vampire attack you, because like if you're on chain, it's not just open source, it's also just openness. Like if you're on chain, everyone can see your application, and so and can like interact with it, can compose with it, can vampire attack it, etc. And so you're trying to build, you need to build things in this like hyper adversarial or like hyper context aware way that isn't as like common in traditional web, like say Web 2, where like say something like WhatsApp, like it's a much more like a lot of it's like probably obviously it's some parts of it are based it's based on Signal protocol, but it's like like a lot of the clients, all stuff, it's like private, right? You can't necessarily easily just like spin up your own WhatsApp, right? And so there's a lot of things about that aspect, especially that where things when you think about building something that people want to use, et cetera, it's like you kind of have to think about like all these like open source considerations and openness considerations. But the other thing that's cool is that you also get to tap into, especially in the modular stack, you get to tap into pre-built infrastructure and all the surrounding tools, everything for each layer typically. And so that's another thing that's like a plus of that around that constraint too. The other big thing, another way to think about just like go to market in crypto is that ultimately the end user, everyone on the planet who could interact with this stuff, they don't walk around the world thinking about the infrastructure, the products that are getting built. Like they're walking around, they're doing their thing, and they kind of just stumble across either a product, a blockchain, whatever, and it's not like they unless they're an enthusiast, unless they're into this space, they don't necessarily like it doesn't even come into their consciousness that like this is something relevant to them or whatever. And basically, but yet there's this whole like sort of stack of things that sort of are there powering their what they're interacting with. So this is what I kind of was like one way to think about it is like the user from their perspective, they're like, okay, I have a wallet, I have my funds here. Increasingly, that even feels like kind of abstracted, right? You can log in with Google, with things like Privy or Dynamic or whatever, and then you interact with applications. And those applications are maybe nowadays, people are doing things through Telegram bots. They're doing things through, in much more Web 2 like experiences. And so, like a lot of what they're doing is just increasingly just interacting with applications and a wallet. And there's like increasingly less and less of a the full infrastructure stack is increasingly not as exposed to them. And so this is a kind I was making is like going back to the bus meme. It's sort of like there's people who are users who are sort of like, I'm just living my life doing this thing, and there's all this infrastructure who is just fighting to kind of get integrated and connected to the apps that serve, or the products that serve these or interact with, that these users interact with, right? And then the other thing I was going to say is that users, below what the user sees and interacts with, is like there's basically this thing called the developer zone, right? Which is like, this is all the stuff that basically, like obviously developers are building stuff all the way to the user, but the point here is more just that there's this whole part of the stack where it's like exclusively developer centric, where like the execution layer, the rollup framework, the RAS, the managed infrastructure, and then things like Celestia or settlement layers or whatever, all these other parts of the stack. And nobody, is really sitting around necessarily thinking about this whole thing. And basically, what I think, one thing I wanted to sort of hone in on is that you want to find, basically, like when you're building an application across this whole stack, you basically want to really hone in on, an actual user with an actual end-to-end user story that sort of goes from all the way from the bottom of the stack all the way to the end user. You don't want to, if you're going to build something that's like some piece of infrastructure, you're going to build some new some custom execution layer. You're building like a role framework, or you're building an app. It's like or a chain that's like targeted at some ecosystem. What is that actual end-to-end user story that your product or protocol uniquely suits right away and solves real problem? And it sounds sounds so obvious, but go look at like most of the things, like a lot of the products and projects out there in crypto, and you'll realize that about what they do as like a piece of infrastructure, but you can't necessarily always speak to who their exact user is. And those things disappear, right? Like those are the things that do not continue on, do not make it to future phases of the industry. And it's like, it's okay if like that initial user that you find doesn't excite you. It's okay if they don't confirm. As long as they confirm your product market fit and they create a feedback loop. Basically, that's all you're looking for. Like you just need to have basically a way to know that somebody needs what you're building on, and that like unless there's skin in the game, someone actually has skin in the game to actually go build an end-to-end working thing that meets some kind of criteria of success. You're never going to know whether the thing you're building, anyone wants it. And a common way that this that projects fail in crypto is more about basically a lack of like discovery around this end-to-end readiness problem, and a lack of like not shipping fast enough, not getting to users fast enough. And if you can't find somebody to use your product or protocol, if you know, but you're basically, it's very early maybe in the market that you're trying to go after, the thing you're going after, nobody really sees the benefits of it, then just go dog food it. Like just go literally just find someone or build yourself and see what the problems are, see what emerges. You need to have, but there needs to be that end-to-end experience, because otherwise, if you go back to this diagram, it's like you don't necessarily know what layer of the stack there might be bottlenecks, or there might be problems, where maybe you actually should vertically integrate your product. Maybe there's things that you basically can do uniquely by connecting multiple of these layers, as opposed to just building a thin layer. And so, in a lot of what we see in this industry broadly, especially in the monster stack, is folks realizing this point. Actually, like you see so many cases where folks are sort of like they're building X layer, they're building X thing, and they sort of realize, oh, actually, nobody like the developer, like this layer is cool, but like there's no way to bootstrap it, or this type of network is cool, but there's no way to get people to just jump in and use it without this additional adoption, these additional complementary pieces of infrastructure. The next thing I say is like it's just fundamentally like ultimately what really matters here is just this notion of user empathy. And what you're really looking for at the end of the day is a win-win. Like it's basically a win-win approach that basically triggers a landslide of other users doing basically doing the same thing, right? And so what you need to do is basically you basically need to show that once you find, going back, it's like once you find this thing, you find this actual user. This actual user is basically validating or validating your PMF or surfacing why your thing doesn't make sense. Basically, you basically you either need to course correct, right? It's like you sort of like figure out what's not working, etc. Or obviously the main thing is like you just quadruple down on whatever this exact use case is, because in crypto, even if the market size isn't that big, the hard part in general has been aside from these initial few use cases, like there's just basically a number of verticals where things really will take off, and that's why there's like certain categories with like really big runaway success. Those things like DeFi, those things like NFTs, to some extent that's things like gaming, etc. But like there's this whole long tail, like it's almost like middle part of the industry, or like whole set of other applications that kind of don't really we haven't really seen runaway success in, and that's because those things basically don't have those basically that level of PMF. And maybe what's going to change in that category is just moving it to something high throughput. So for example, gaming is a great example where historically there have been the infrastructure that people have used to build things like gaming projects, etc., have been they can't scale to 1 billion users. And so if you're going to be building something at that layer, for example, the modular stack actually is like an unlock, big unlock for basically potentially finding some like big vertical success in some vertical like that. And so there's like a lot of opportunities that kind of to date have basically been stymied. It's very easy to think of them as like they're not going to work out, etc. But like look at things like Friend Tech or now Farcaster, etc. It's like on-chain social was an idea from many years ago. It's an idea from like 2016, 2017. There were even people like trying to build these kinds of products and protocols. And why do they take off now? Why are they go to market successful now? Well, it's like because the infrastructure and the market readiness for this thing of just people actually building the end-to-end thing is there. And so like you look at, for example, like an example like Friend Tech's really good one. One of the things that really unlocked it was the arrival of Privy and the PWA, PWAs and embedded wallets. And basically, like even a bunch of these projects, they had been doing other things before that. They realized those things didn't, when they went to actually go work with customers, they realized they didn't really work. And then they found these opportunities, they seized them, and they built an end-to-end experience that then, like, even if it's not that good, like I don't know if people try like the early Friend Tech or even early like Warpcast or Farcaster, right? It's like these products were not actually that, like, they're not very good from a Web 2 perspective, but they have this like end-to-end quality that drives success. And one of the things I've noticed, for example, in the past 6 months to, since say, I keep using Friend Tech because it had this before and after effect, was that we'd go to talk to, for example, execution layer teams or other infrastructure layer teams, and they'd always say, "I'm looking for my Friend Tech moment, or this moment where basically something will take off." It's like, well, and I'd ask them like, "Well, are you building like what's like what are you building that is end to end to the user such that basically you could onboard something like that?" And the answer was usually that they weren't really doing that. They were sort of thinking of it more from the bottom of the stack. They're thinking of like, well, we have a chain, or we have we have this like custom execution environment, we have this other piece of infrastructure, not basically we want to build this thing that like has a cohesive end-to-end experience that gets people to do something. And so that's the thing to emphasize. And in the modular stack, we get the opportunity to swap out like things that are like sort of where we can build even more cohesive or end-to-end experiences compared to stuff like Solana and other monolithic chains. And those chains have sort of a different set of benefits and properties. But one of the things that we can do is we can actually turn the modular stack into something that has more user empathy than like anything that's come before, because we can continually, by focusing, starting at the end user, starting at with user empathy, we basically can work backwards to figure out what layers are missing, rather than going upwards and saying, that like we're going to start with, say, like some new execution layer, some new ZK thing, some whatever. Like, no, let's start with the user. Let's force ourselves to reckon with and understand what layers we need, what is the best cohesive experience, but retain all the properties and benefits of doing it on the modular stack, the end user verification, the advantages of building on something where someone can have like sovereign infrastructure and customize what they're doing the whole way down. And so that's the point of this thing. And so that's the end. But that's kind of like the point to leave with is like, if you want to figure out whether your piece of infrastructure is needed or whatever, just like start from day one as soon as you possibly can with like this end user full end-to-end experience, even if it's horrible, even if you have to build it yourself, because otherwise like we just don't really know. We just don't really know what your thing is useful for, or how it plugs in, or why we need it. But if we build in a way where and we just like sort of grow this modular ecosystem in a way where there is like an end, it starts with users, it's all driven by user empathy, then basically we never have to wonder whether there's too much infra chasing through your apps. Like we can validate it, we can figure out what's missing, we can address problems like fragmentation or bad user experience, or whatever that people like to talk about, rather than sort of just say that they'll be solved through some other layer or some other approach.
It's a few slides back, if you want to go back to that.
Oh yeah, just give me a sec.
Yeah, no worries.
Which one?
The slide that you were talking about, how everything really works, and what your examples would be in your perspective. Let's see. I think keep maybe a few slides back. Let's see. Yeah, right here.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So, I mean, I think the example is some of these new things that are coming out on like things like base L3s. I think are one where I think it's really cool. Is like you can have 0-fee onboarding. You can basically allow someone to have totally custom block space. And like I mean, I think we're seeing like a lot of developer traction around stuff where you can basically customize way more of the stack, and that's where I think it can really work. And there's obviously there have been a bunch, I think a bunch of really cool sort of like apps that people are like, they haven't launched yet, but they're kind of just waiting for kind of like the right basically they're waiting for kind of the readiness of a bunch of these sort of higher throughput roll up stacks combined with, let's say, something like Celestia or whatever, and like that plus like good account abstraction tooling, etc., can create these like really nice user experiences. And I think that's probably the best example is like stuff where you basically, so for example, I mean, the example I gave before was Frentech, but like say it's Farcaster frames. Like for example, the folks at Syndicate built this Farcaster frames L3. It costs almost nothing, and like in the frame they actually were doing something where you let people mint there on this L3, and then basically they would look at how much in fee basically they would have paid on Ethereum, or I think, or on Base itself or whatever, and it's like the orders of magnitude different in cost. And basically things like that I think are really cool. It's like you have this cheap onboarding, people can do on-chain actions the way they do interact with Web2 apps, stuff like that. I think are the things that we're like are just very exciting from an adoption perspective.
The chat. Thank you for the detailed answer. We really appreciate it, and also the presentation. It was very detailed and very interesting to learn more about Celestia's go to market, your strategies, how important the user is, and like the verticals that go through it. Yeah, and just a few questions on my side as well. I was just wondering, the hackathon is live right now. The deadline is, I believe, May 17th. So there's a month left, or a month and a half left for you guys to, enter the hackathon to submit your submissions. But in your perspective and your personal opinion, what is some, projects that you're looking forward to seeing from the hackathon?
Yeah, I think for me the most exciting things to see are people building user-facing stuff, just period, full stop. So anything it's like on-chain, anything gaming related, anything where someone is building something that is really cheap on chain for the user, but basically is like usable by any we can actually go and you go to an actual web app and you can use it. And like I think that's the phase of the modular ecosystem that we're in, where it's like that's kind of all that matters in terms of unlocking the next wave of infrastructure. Is like we need to like really validate that we basically have something that works, that's end to end ready. And basically I think like those are the types of things that I'll be looking at the most, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Those are some exciting projects. I'm looking forward to, some of those use cases as well. We have another question from the audience as well. What are some of the, tech apps that you were talking about? Rollkit, Sovereign, Astra, and like other examples as well. What toolings like are most commonly seen in between those gaps? And kind of like what are the solutions for that as well?
Yeah, so I think there's like two big things that I see. So one I think is definitely the short-term one is is kind of like good interop across and onboarding across a lot of different chains. And I think that actually a lot of the ingredients are there, a lot of the tools are there. There's things like Skip API, Socket, Relay Protocol, etc. But once there's like more things like Polygon's ag layer, there's a lot of like really cool possibilities when once that onboarding once you can onboard it to any chain from anywhere in crypto. I think that's going to make things look a lot different, and like people are going to it's going to allow more and more people to like build their own chain and with confidence, rather than like feel like, oh, if I build my own chain I won't be able to get users because they're all going somewhere else, or they're closer to say building on Base or whatever. One of the big things though also is there's a lot of infrastructure. It's like when you go from being an application on Ethereum, an application on Base, application on Arbitrum One, wherever you are, you want to go and you want to deploy your own chain instead of just being an app on those chains. There's a whole set of things that that you have to watch out. Say you are a Perpstex, or you are a something that relies on oracles. Well, if you're used to using Chainlink, you don't necessarily have Chainlink anymore on your new chain. And so there's this question of like, well, that type of infrastructure where there's some premium around the support that's given to like existing chain to applications, that needs to be redesigned for like sort of the chain based approach. And so there's a lot of effort needed and a lot missing from from that part of the stack still. And like there's a lot of people who want to address it, but it's still really nascent. And I just think until there's a lot more applications at that layer, and a lot more chains at that layer, like it's just gonna take a while to basically sort of fill all those gaps end to end.
Yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you, everyone in the audience, for asking these questions. If you guys have any further questions, please feel free to type them in the chat right now. We'd love to answer them and discuss them a little bit further. But yeah, just kind of going back to the hackathon. The prize pool currently is $100,000 USD. So that's up to grabs as well. And Celestia has implemented a unique way to kind of integrate into the community by having four different teams. If I remember correctly, it's the House of Puddletail, the House of Whimsyfall, House of Mindflux, and House of Lemon Tree. So you could join these different teams. Just kind of if Jacob, if you want to kind of give a more detailed explanation of these teams, but it's kind of a way for the hackers to be part of a community, and further down the line these communities will be able to receive different benefits that are tailored to your community. But I feel like this is like a really interesting and unique way to engage the community. Yeah, so Jacob, if you have any like insights and you want to kind of talk about that a little further, I'd love to hear your
Yeah.
thoughts as
So I
well.
think the coolest thing is that it kind of changes the whole dynamic around hackathons. Like, so I think the thing that's really original and interesting about it, fundamentally, is just that it creates like it kind of reshuffles your allegiance. Like when you like, so like if you are just like, say you are, I don't know, say you're just you're a developer who is built, used to building games. You go to ETH Global Hackathons, or you go to some Autonomous World Hackathon, or whatever. It's like, instead of being associated with like whatever other tribal associations you might have going into one of those things, instead you kind of have this constructed or like new like identity within this like modular hackathon like universe, that basically just kind of it like creates a different framing in which you look at even like that the space, and you're kind of now sucked into this like world, this like other world, this other like hackathon universe, and then hopefully we want we want everyone to sort of carry that over into like sort of like building in the modular ecosystem in some way. And so so I think like that's like, and that's very that to me feels very, that's like very original. I think it's like very, it's something that will take a while to develop and refine and get right. Like I don't think it's gonna, I think there's going to be people who, it'll take some adjustment for people to like fully get it. Like in fact, when I first heard the idea, I was actually confused initially, and then once I clicked for me, I was like, oh, this is actually really original. Like this is like a really new take on things that I think could really get people to like feel like they're in a different like they've been brought into a universe of like other people building crazy like inspiring stuff. So I think that's basically how I think about it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think kind of it correlates with your whole entire, theme and mission about focusing on the users first and like being very user centric and building out that community. So I think it's really important and also unique, like you said, and will be, a very interesting and original idea that could be implemented to the hackathon. Um, but yeah, I don't see any further questions that are coming in right now. So I think with that, I just want to, give another shout out and thank you to Jacob once again for your time. We really appreciate, the presentation, going through the whole entire strategies, go to market, and the importance of the user base, the verticals that you guys are having right now. Um, and I also want to thank everyone in the audience for coming and joining us for another workshop for Celestia. And I do recommend everyone to check out the Celestia Hackathon on DoraHacks page. You can find more details regarding, the submission dates, the deadline, and also the judging, and also more details. It's very important to read over the submission guidelines. There's a lot of different nuances that are being detailed out and explained. So please take a look at it. So to make sure that you guys can put your best foot forward to complete and be qualified for the hackathon as well. Um, oh, we have another question that came in from the audience. Thank you for asking. We appreciate it. They said slightly uninformed question, but what is the big deal with PWAs? Isn't it just a mobile first React app?
Yeah, I think maybe because I mentioned it in relation to Fantech and stuff, but the reason I brought it up, or like reason I think it's a really big deal, is that if you go back to here, one of the things that like kind of sits above where it says wallet, is or maybe between, sorry, between wallet and say app, is basically basically like this distribution question, like how do you access this? How do you access this application that you want to interact with? And the thing that PWA have solved kind of or improved is that the app stores like Google, Google Play and Apple's App Store, the iOS App Store, they're not very friendly to crypto applications historically. And so what happened was that last year there's this period where PWA basically Apple decided to start allowing notifications in PWAs. And so when you'd add one to your phone, you'd add like you'd bookmark a PWA on your home screen or whatever. You could basically could send push notifications to your phone. And so that means that the PWA that you're using now, almost anyone can download it, or not download, but like have it on their phone like the way they would a native app. And it has like all the experiences, like the user experience pretty close to what you're used to with like any mobile app that you use, like native mobile app that you use. And so that's a really big deal because distribution wise, you can sign in that PWA, and then like people started building infrastructure like Privy and whatnot that is really well suited to having signing in there and stuff. And so there's just like a whole kind of like a very it breaks a lot of the distribution bottlenecks that typically have held back, have slowed down the access to users. So it's like if you think of it before, it was like think about the user experience of crypto. It's like if you were using something on your mobile phone, you basically would have to like use Wallet Connect and kind of like go between your native your wallet, and then basically like say you're on Uniswap, you want to buy something, or OpenSea or something, you have to go back. You'd have to like do this like deep linking experience. It's like really weird. Whereas like in PWAs, you kind of just sign stuff directly. You just interact with stuff. At least when you use something like Privy, you can like directly interact with it in a lot of cases. So it's those things together, kind of like basically in addition to cheaper block space on base, in addition to this, just sort of like kind of just right place, right time, like all of that stuff together has created kind of a different distribution funnel for crypto that basically takes it from kind of like enthusiasts to everyone, because everyone can install PWA.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that question from the audience. We really appreciate it. Yeah, if there's any further questions, please feel free to ask them now in the chat. We'll take a look at them and discuss them. But yeah, just continuing on. If we don't have any further questions that are coming through, let me take a second to make sure. But yeah, just another follow up question. Do you have any like tips for the hackathon that you're looking to advise for these developers that are building out? And also like, is there any like hacker resources? I know there's a bunch of hacker resources and like, developer resources on the DoraHacks Celestia Hackathon website. So feel free to check out those documents that are being shared on the website to kind of help you guys out. There's a lot of detailed documents, very informative as well, to kind of help streamline the process for any new development projects that you guys are building out. But yes, I think I don't see any further questions. So if there's any like developers that kind of want to contact Celestia directly and want to ask for more detailed information on what to build, for just contacting you, is there any kind of resources that they can reach out to you guys?
Yeah, I mean, we have, if you go to celestia.org/build, you can check out the different rollup frameworks you can use, get to or docs.celestia.org. You can start playing around with like a bunch of different examples, especially shout out to like Josh and Diego and Viet and all those folks that, and just the whole DevRel team has done like amazing stuff they've done amazing work to really build all these like really nice docs and onboarding tools. And so I think all that stuff is there. One of the main projects I'd like to see for the hackathon is another question we got. I guess so one of the main ones, honestly, I just want to see things like user facing things. Like that's like really, I honestly don't even want to be able to guess what it's going to be. I would like it'd just be cool to see stuff like where you like applications where you try it out and it's something you've never seen before, or did something really original, or hopefully just something where it's like totally novel, or like fresh, but user facing and practice and like usable by other people or whatever. Like that's the kind of stuff that I'm the most keen on seeing.
Yeah, definitely. Just kind of the whole entire workshop overall overview, improving the user experience so the modular, ecosystem can help onboard new users. I think that's like an important theme and, projects that can implement that theme. That'd be great to see in the hackathon. Um, but yes, if we have any further questions, feel free to ask now. We are slowly running out of time. But I don't see any further questions coming through right now. So with that, I kind of want to close out this workshop with Jacob today. I really want to thank your time, Jacob. Really appreciate your insight on the whole entire strategies and go to market. I also want to thank everyone in the audience as well for taking their time, reaching out, asking questions as well. If you guys have any further questions about the hackathon, feel free to contact us directly at DoraHacks or also on our Discord as well. We can help you and also guide you as well to reach out and connect you to the right point of contact for any questions that you may have. And we'll try to answer them as well if it directly relates to us as well. There's a lot of details on our DoraHacks Celestia website, kind of gives details about the submission deadlines, the prize pool, the judges as well. And once again, I do recommend that everyone takes a deeper dive and deeper look into, the eligibility for, the prize pool. Just make sure that you guys fit in the requirements and that you guys don't get disqualified in any way. But yeah, with that, I want to give you another thanks to Jacob for your time today. I really appreciate that. And I think we could close out. Thank you once again, everyone in the audience, for asking questions and being part of and taking the time to be part with us today. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Jacob. And if you have any closing statements, feel free to no. Go
No,
for
just
it now.
excited to see how it. No, just excited to see how it all plays out and what people build.
Awesome. Thank you, Jacob. Alrighty, Lynn, I think